What is going on, everybody? It is a Wednesday morning, August 21st. I'm Dylan Denmark. Graham Marsh will be beside me in a second. I start every show off that way. I got to start with a new show open entrance. Maybe if we get this show sponsored one day, we can start off with that. Hope everybody is doing well. We are just a couple of days removed or a couple of days before the start of college football. You know, college football is really the only sport left that really has a special, opening week. It feels special. LSU USC is going to feel special. Florida Miami is going to feel special. They don't usually play. Every other sport, whether it be college or any professional league, it's always just kind of the same. It's Jags Chiefs week 1. Okay, whatever. It's, the MLB, they'll go to Japan. That kind of makes it feel special, but it's kind of weird. I hope that kind of stays that way. And, the way the NFL is kind of trending, I kind of didn't want to start off this way, but it kind of just came to me. I was listening to Chuck Oliver last night. He was talking about this. The NFL is kind of taking Christmas away from the NBA. They've taken Martin Luther King Day away from the NBA, or they're probably going to in the future. I hope that the NFL season, because we know it's going to move to 18 games, they don't take away Labor Day weekend away from college football.
They will.
Oh, yeah, they will. Now, it's going to happen probably the next, I'll say 3 to 5 years. Just because they can.
Yeah, I mean, if you're right, if there's a date or a time right now where you are speculating and hoping that, and the sentence starts with, I hope the NFL doesn't take away from this.
They're just gonna say yes and move on.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I don't think we're far away. It's all relative. When I say far away, I mean 10 to 15 years from now. You're going to see, I think you're going to see some version, maybe not every week, but somehow, some way you're going to see the NFL on Friday nights.
Oh,
because, historically, both college and the NFL always protected high school football by not creeping into Friday nights.
Yeah, now they don't care about that stuff.
Man, there's a college football. There's a somewhat, it's not going to be Alabama, Texas, but there's a somewhat intriguing college football game every Friday night now. It'll be an ACC, Syracuse, Virginia Tech, or whatever. And that I'm not saying that's box office material, but it's a game that if you got nothing else to do on a Friday, you'll sit down and watch and pay attention to. And historically, that was not the case because of high school football. College don't care anymore. The NFL is gonna college. When college opens those doors and says it's okay to not care, then the NFL says, "Oh, okay."
Well, I mean, it's not like somebody's running college football and saying you can't do this, you can't do that, because the NFL answers to their TV networks and that's it. And now you have more TV networks with Amazon Prime and Peacock, and you're trying to answer. And those guys, Netflix is another one. Right. So it's going to happen eventually. Graham, the big news, Billy Napier spoke late Monday night. I don't know if you noticed. He spoke at 8:30. I felt the occasion was kind of weird. I think they had just scrimmaged, and he talked after the scrimmage. I think that's what the occasion was. The big story that came out, or not a big story, the biggest thing that he said is talking about Montrell Johnson. Everybody was kind of on edge if he was going to play, and Billy Napier basically said he's doing fantastic. He's been able to do a couple of things. We expect him to be able to participate in practice, whether that's modified at some point, full speed. We'll give you an update at that point. And then he later on in that quote said, we have confidence Montrell's doing great and feel good about his return. So if you felt 50-50 when he initially got hurt a couple weeks ago, and now that we're a week and a half away from the Miami game, it feels pretty good that he's going to be able to playing again in Miami next Saturday.
I agree. If you had asked me this, we talked about this on the podcast maybe a little over a week ago now, maybe a week and a half or so. Both of us were kind of, we didn't say outright then that, we both believe beyond a shadow of a doubt he's not going to play, but we both kind of alluded to okay, Trayon Webb, time to step up. Jaden Ball, time to step up. They're going to have to throw the ball probably a little bit more. We even talked about, does this mean DJ Lagway might get more snaps than he would have originally to maybe help the run game some? I don't know if I think all of those conversation points might be moot now because it looks like Montrell. In my opinion, I would say now I think Montrell's going to play. If I gun to my head, I got a bet on it. I think when you and I show up in the swamp at 3 o'clock on, is it 3 or 3:30?
3:30.
At 3:30 on Saturday.
Joe Tessitore on the call.
Yeah, number one's going to be in the ball game the first snap for the Gators, I believe now.
Yeah, when you initially first got hurt, my thought was, if it's something where he can risk his injury to be even more, because we all agree that this is the biggest game of the season because it's the first game and what can happen if you win this game and what it can mean moving forward with your confidence and all that. And I was of the thought that if his knee is not right going into that game, don't risk it to where you can make it worse and he could potentially blow his knee out and be done for the year. It doesn't feel like that's the situation. It feels like it was a tweak. Recovery's going good. Okay, if Billy says that he's able to be able to full go on practice next week, then you're good to go, and you should be able to get your 15, 20 carries and stay down, all 3 downs and catch the ball in the backfield with no issue.
The number one thing, man, that we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Let's assume that he does play, okay? And we don't know right now if he does play, we don't know right now if that means he's going to get the typical lion's share of the carries that he would in a game like this if he had never gotten injured, versus maybe still, because he did get injured and you're trying to get him back up to speed, maybe even though he plays, maybe you still give Treyon Webb or Jaden Barr, Katie Daniels a couple extra carries or what have you. Even if that's true, where I think I really need Montrell in a game like that, considering the magnitude of the game, considering they absolutely have to win, and this game is not about bringing guys along, getting guys experience. No. This game is they got to treat this like the Super Bowl. They got to win this game. Where I need Montrell, I think more than anything, is I need him on passing down situations where Miami might be sending one extra guy, and I need a back that is going to know where to pick up the blitz and make that block to help Mertz get that extra second or two to get the ball downfield to Eugene Wilson or Chimere Dike or whoever. That's the number one area of concern for me when I thought he potentially was not going to play is pass pro. We've seen Treyon Webb in a game, and he's been relatively effective carrying the ball.
He was decent for a freshman last year.
Jaden Ball looked really, really strong in the spring game and heard even better reviews throughout camp. Heard Katie Daniels has busted off a couple of big runs. I have confidence that if those guys need to tote the rock and the line is giving them some holes, they'll do okay. It's pass pro, it's catching the ball, and in plays where they do run routes, it's running the right route, being in the right. It's those little things that experienced guys know better.
Those are things that you only see when you're live action. Even in a scrimmage, you don't know what you have until the lights come on. You don't know what you have until those guys show up there in front of 90,000 people. And the thing about college that no other sport, high school football and in the NFL, there's no preseason. There's no warm-up. So your warm-up is the scrimmage that, that they've been having in practice.
Right.
Like Billy said, they ran 160 plays, which is a lot of plays for any kind of team. Now, granted, that's not all the stars. You throw in your 2s and your 3s and you go. But point being, you don't know what you have, and you don't know what kind of situation and scenarios that's going to be thrown at you if you're a running back until you get those live bullets. One thing that Napier said, and again, he's not going to throw those guys under the bus, but one thing he said that kind of made me feel good was he thinks the offensive line has gotten a lot more depth, gotten 2s pretty much at every position. Roderick Kearney said he's gained 20, 25 pounds. And he's really confident in what the offensive line can do and the depth that he can have at every position, not just, just a couple of the interior or just a couple of the tackles.
Yeah. You just said Roderick Kearney, guy from Jacksonville here. Dudes like that, I think, are a classic example of the type of guys that are going to need to step up this year for Billy Napier, because while he has recruited well, I think at the very top end, that depth I do think has across the whole board, across his entire roster now, because I think everybody kind of understands that this is Billy's best roster on paper that he's had since he's been at Florida,
for
top
sure.
to bottom. It is that kind of second level of guy, though, that I think is the biggest question mark on this team. I think they've done a good job of, be it transfer portal, be it guys that got some experience last year, trial by fire and now should be ready to really step up. The Jordan Castells of the world, those types of Eugene Wilson types of guys that were true freshmen last year, played a lot of football and should now be ready to probably take on a little bit of a leadership role, which is crazy to say as a sophomore, but have played football, should be able to. But it's guys like Kearney, it's those type guys that were either low-level 4-star or 3-star recruits that they need to have developed in their system by now. That need to be, if they got to be in a live game action, they got to play, they got to perform. And that gets back to that stable of backs. That is, Trayon Webb fits that description. Jaden Ball fits that. Or is Jaden Ball a freshman? I forgot what you're Jaden. Okay, so Jaden Ball maybe a little bit different. But Trayon Webb, it fits that. He's got to be ready if Montrell can't go, or if he can't go as much as he would, or just in general, Montrell needs an RB2. Even if he's fully healthy, he can't take every carry.
Yeah, you need a blow every now and then.
Those types of guys I need to see have Andy Jean, Aiden Mizell. I need to see some of those guys step up and be able to participate in the offense.
Speaking of Gene, who it was Gene Frazier's and it was somebody else. They all got hurt to some extent. Expect those guys to miss some time. There was somebody else I can't remember who it was. But there's no. That's the thing with college football. It starts next week. They got a game and there's gonna be no injury report, which is also gonna be another thing that's gonna change. It's more like the NFL. Yes, get over it. Move on. And one other thing about the offensive line that Napier brought up was he said if there was one thing in particular that they've gotten better at, it is pass protection. So that is a good thing. That if for whatever reason they're not able to run the ball against Miami, and if it's true that you've gotten better at that pass pro, then you should be able to feel confident going into year 3, have a returning quarterback, have 3 of your 5 offensive linemen, having a veteran running back that's been in your program, been with you for the last 3-4 years, whatever it's been. You should feel confident in that.
I agree. I think the offensive line for both teams are in many ways going to make or break this football game on 831. Partly because of the way these teams specifically are built, but partly just because that's football. The offensive and defensive lines make or break. We talked about this at nauseam all season. It's about the trenches. I will say though, man, like yes, it's encouraging that Billy Napier is saying that the pass pro looks good. The run blocking needs to look good too, man. Like I don't know, I don't think Florida's good enough to beat Miami just by throwing the ball. No, 40, 50 times. They are going to have to establish some type of run game. I mean, throughout that game, man, I think especially early on, like first 2 quarters, Montrell, assuming Montrell plays, he's going to need to get going a little bit. Webb is going to need to get going a little. When they get the ball, we can't be having a 2023 Jacksonville Jaguar scenario where they just get stuffed for 1 yard or net minus 1 yard or whatever every first and second. Now that ain't gonna work, man. Because I like the passing game. I like Mertz. I like Wilson. I like some of the guys they've gotten in the portal and whatever. I like DK. Badger's going to take a little more time to get going. Jackson, they've got a passing game I feel confident in. They don't have a passing game that's, I think, is so explosive that if they get behind the chains, they're going to be able to make up for it.
No, probably not.
I mean,
they're probably not going to happen.
I mean, I got news for you, Gator fans, and I think most of you watching are going to agree with me here. As much as we like Mertz, like I'm saying, if they're consistently getting in 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 11, that's going to be a problem. And again, Billy Napier just simply said the pass protection is looking good. That doesn't mean the run protection is looking bad per se. But we're going to find out a lot. I think by the end of the first quarter, you and I are going to know what type of running game they're going to have for the day.
Agreed. Let's move on to the Gator Roundtable that you were part of. Were you part of the production team that set up all the cameras and the audio?
I was the production team. It's a production team of 1.
Production of 1. Mr. Graham Marsh.
Correct.
So the roundtable with Steve Spurrier, Shane Matthews, Chris Doring, and Mr. Dan Hicken, or I call him Professor Dan Hicken, adjunct professor at the University of North Florida. We've done this the last couple, 4, 5, 6 years, where you and those guys, they go down to Gainesville and they just talk about the season and they talk about what they expect to come. You said you have thoughts.
Yeah.
And I'll throw it to you. I had one major thought.
Yeah, it hasn't been quite that long. It's been 2021 was the first year.
Okay.
So this was year 4. 21, 22, 23, 24.
Okay.
This was year 4.
I had one kind of big takeaway that I've heard that I didn't really think about, and then I did a little bit of research. Cam Ward playing in the Swamp. How much of an effect that's going to have. So Shane brought up when Bo Nix went to the Swamp and how much of an effect that was for him, obviously, because we remember Auburn. He couldn't deal with the crowd. One thing, Bo Nix was a true freshman, came straight out of high school, and really that was his second true road game. His first road game was at A&M, and Auburn jumped on A&M early, took the crowd out of it in 2019. Then they came to the Swamp, and Graham, I've been going to the game since 2006.
I know what you're about to say.
And that was the loudest game that I've been to from beginning to end. Not saying one specific play, from beginning to end, that was the loudest game that I've been to.
Agreed.
I understand how that can affect a freshman at a true as a guy that just came out of high school. Will it affect Cam Ward? I'm sure, but this guy's played a lot of college football. And granted, it hasn't been at the loudest places. The only loud place he's been at is Oregon, and that's a crowd of 68,000 people.
Yeah.
So, how much of an effect that's going to have? I think people are buying in a little too much into it. It plays a factor, but I don't think it plays as much of a factor as we think it is.
Yeah, the Bo Nix comparison is not a fair one in my opinion for a couple of reasons. A is one that you just said. Bo Nix was a true freshman. Cam Ward has played college football. That's reason one that's different. A true freshman versus somebody that's had multiple years of playing and at least one season of playing under his belt in the Power 5 level, now Power 4 level.
This will be his 5th year, by the way.
Yeah, so that's big difference there. Just to get that out of the way, that's huge right there. Second big difference, I would say, is Florida had a good defense back then. 2019, Florida had a good defense. C.J. Henderson was, his career in the NFL is a different story, but he was a first-round pick for a reason. You had Jonathan Grenard, who's still playing really well in the NFL.
Kyrie Elam wasn't on. Was he out there in 19?
Elam was a freshman.
Yes.
Elam was a freshman on that team. But you had dudes on that defense. That was not a defense that basically handed Jaden Daniels the Heisman Trophy from last year. How the 2024 Florida defense will be remains to be seen, but until I see some type of actual on-field performance, I have reason to believe that whatever they'll be is going to be closer to what they were last year, which was putrid, than 2019. I'm not saying they're going to be as bad as last year, but I don't have enough reason yet to believe they're going to be 2019 level good on defense. Those are the main two things. Now, and here's another thing. It's the first game, so it might be somewhat the same. Auburn that year, that was kind of a weird year in 2019 where they didn't have a bunch of great home games. The home schedule wasn't great that year in terms of for the fans. So Florida really showed out for that game.
Yeah, and it was the homecoming. So
the
alumni shows up more for the homecoming game than any other game.
Right. It felt like Florida's Super Bowl that season in a lot of ways.
Yeah, Florida State was bad with Taggart, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to think of that home schedule. Because LSU was at home in 19, but I get your point.
Yeah, so that's not the case this year, obviously. I mean, every home game except Sanford is we went through this last episode, is must watch. So a couple reasons that that's not a fair comparison. Now, what is true is it is Cam Ward's first game ever for Miami against a hostile crowd. That, like, I agree with you that I think it's being a little bit overblown on Gator fans, but it does matter. It does matter. I would venture to believe that at some point in this game, it's going to give Miami some type of communication issues. Maybe it causes an extra delay game or something. Maybe it causes a couple of false starts. Maybe it causes a receiver to think they're running one play, but they run another, run the wrong route. Maybe that results in an interception. Who knows? We know what crowd noise does, but the Swamp will be there. It'll be rocking. It'll be crazy. It will matter. How much it will matter, I think, remains to be seen, and I agree with you that it's a little bit overblown.
All right, so what else did you take away from the round table?
The number one takeaway that I had, and because you've listened to it now, obviously, and I want to know if you agree with me on this. I think that it is very obvious that Coach Spurrier, he understands who he is. He knows that it's probably him and Tim Tebow that have the voices that carry the most magnitude with the University of Florida. Right?
Yes, if they say something, it gets picked up.
Those are the two people that if they say anything Gator related, it explodes in Gator Nation, right? Like, no two voices carry more weight than those two guys. Okay. Spurrier understands that, and he's extremely media trained. He's like been coaching for how long and was a player before that. He's extremely media trained. So he fully understands the weight of what he says. So because of that, he's careful about what he says. And I know Spurrier and being careful what he says aren't typically, he's always known for being outspoken. But I think right now, within the program and knowing kind of where he stands right now and what he should and shouldn't say, he just kind of has a good finger on the pulse about that. So he's careful with his words a little bit, I think, about Coach Napier. I thought with a little bit of his body language and facial expressions and some of the things he kind of said to sort of dance around it, I think it's obvious that Coach Spurrier is not a big fan of Billy Napier. That was my takeaway. Did you agree or disagree?
I didn't. Now, I mean, now that you say that, I'm kind of thinking different. I mean, and those three, I will say, like, Shane Matthews is optimistic about the program, things that they'll do well. Same with Chris Doering, very high. And Coach wasn't as, along with them two, like, as highly optimistic. I think he said they'll go 6-6. What was this? Something that Spurrier said in the offseason. I wish I knew you were going to bring this up. It was something he said back in, like, April or May, and he had, like, a big quote that everybody picked up on it. And it had to do with Napier and not liking where the program was, like, where the program's at, and he doesn't do this well. He basically said something very negative, and it went all over the airwaves. Do you remember, like, the headline that he said something?
Yeah, I remember him saying something.
Okay, it was something along those lines, and I can't remember exactly specifically what it was. Maybe if you want to go back on our YouTube archives and go back to, it was around April or May, because it was after spring ball, if I'm not mistaken. And everybody was talking about this, and he basically was like, "Napier's not this, but Napier's not that."
All right, I got the quote.
Okay, what is it?
He said it on the Times Union, by the way.
That's right, he did.
This is Spurrier's quote talking to the Times Union about the program in general. Quote: "There's a feeling around the Gators of what the heck are we doing? There's a lot of questions that I don't have the answers to about organization. Just because you hire the most people doesn't mean you're going to win. All these extra people, I question how much that really helps. Billy is a good guy who works his tail off. I like Billy, good family man. But we do wish the organization was a little bit more tidy."
Yeah, so that was the quote that I was referring to.
And again,
and that was what was the day on that?
That was March 4th.
Okay.
So it was a while ago. Again, that was... He didn't say anything that damning in the roundtable. But even that, okay, again, we all know that Spurrier is outspoken. I'm well aware of that. I'm just saying that right now, with kind of Spurrier's role as being an ambassador to the university, kind of being back in Gainesville, like, that's his role right now. I don't think is to necessarily be super critical guy, right?
Well, I mean, if you give him a mic at a round table, and the round table was 35 minutes, it wasn't just him; it was all four guys were speaking together. Spurrier's usually going to say something that we all take and go, okay, like, we have an opinion on this, or we should have an. He didn't do that at the round table. He kind of just, like you said, just had a ho hum. It just. I wouldn't say danced around, but he just talked. He talked, but he didn't say anything.
Well, one quote I remember specifically that he said was, Doering and Shane both kind of agreed that they kind of have a 7-5 general.
6-6, 7-5.
They both said what we've said, that it's not necessarily the exact record. It's more how it looks aesthetically and what's going on and all. And we agree there. But they both did sort of generally agree that like 7-5, 6-6 range was sort of what they were expecting and what they felt like they would be able to call a good season at the end of the year. And Spurrier was like, well, I really wish it'd be more like 8 or 9. And with the reason I think he's saying that is I think, look, man, when Steve Spurrier came to Florida as a coach, a big role that he had and a huge reason that he built the program into what it was he came in immediately and all the excuses Florida had in the past, all the reasoning for why they're not doing X, Y, and Z, and we're not doing that. Georgia had their number back then, right? And Spurrier's the one that came in and said, at the time, man, we play in a stadium called the Gator Bowl. The game is in Jacksonville, Florida. It's a shorter bus ride for us. We're showing up in Jacksonville, and we're expecting to beat them. We're expecting to win those games when we play them. And Spurrier owned Georgia his whole time there. And part of what made Spurrier such a successful coach was that type of mentality. Spurrier went into every game thinking he's going to beat the other team's ass, right? Regardless of talent, who's on the field, whatever. He always felt like, I have such a good game plan, and I am so ready to go that I am going to beat you into submission every single time. And this is just, again, this is my takeaway. This is conjecture. He didn't say this specifically. My takeaway from editing the podcast and then watching it was Spurrier's kind of facial expressions, sort of what he would say to stuff, makes me think that right now this program has a lot of excuses for stuff, has a lot of reasons Billy Napier hasn't achieved as much as I think a lot of Gator fans would like to. And Spurrier ain't with excuses, man.
Yeah, I think he's a little old school in that sense.
He
I
is.
mean, if you go back and you look at their records, I mean, I just pulled up their records in the 90s. It was all 9-2, 10-2. Their bad year was 9-4, 92, and they made the first ever SEC title game against Alabama with the pick 6.
Man, Steve Spurrier had more SEC championship wins than home losses.
Yeah,
in his career at Florida.
I think Florida went.
Dude, that is stupid, man.
What was it?
That is ridiculous.
How many years they went at home without a loss? It was like they lost to Auburn. They lost to Auburn in like 91 or 92. And then they went all the way to like 99, I think it was. Because 99, they had 4 losses. I think they went that long, if I'm not mistaken. Like Shane Matthews didn't lose a game at home. I think that's what I think.
Yeah, he's never lost a home game.
Didn't lose a home game. And you think of the 95, 96 team. 95 went undefeated. 96 only lost to Florida State on the road. Like that was a big thing. Also, too, I don't know. You know, back then, I don't know how big your staff was. I don't know how much. And another thing, Spurrier wasn't a big recruiter. Spurrier can't. That way he recruited in the 90s. And again, like we weren't alive. We weren't around then. I mean, I always hear the story about James Bates when a recruit came in and he said he wanted to wear number 44. And James Bates was walking by. He goes, Bates, you still wearing 44? He goes, yep. He goes, oh, he ain't wearing 44. And that kid left and went to Florida State. Like, that's not how you recruit today.
Yeah, you can't do that.
So part of it is, you know, him being a little old school and being in his ways and knowing that that's what worked for him. I mean, a lot of the stuff that he did in the 90s, you can't do today. Like, it wouldn't work today either.
I don't disagree, but I also don't know that Steve Spurrier would be the exact same coach.
Right, exactly.
I think he would. Being as great of a coach as he is, I think he would understand that and he'd evolve and figure it out. I think something else with Spurrier, though, is where it might be old school, but I think he's right, is the mentality of it. And look, you can draw a lot of parallels to the mentality that Steve Spurrier instilled in his program back when he came and the quote-unquote unrealistic expectations that Gator fans have now. So Spurrier's not with the excuses, man. That might be the thing that I should have run with more than he doesn't like Billy Napier. And I don't mean to say he hates Billy Napier or thinks he sucks. That's not what I'm trying to say. I just think that it was clear he was a good bit more pessimistic than the other two were between Doring and Matthews. Doring and Matthews were clearly pretty optimistic on the upcoming team, felt like they were going to make big strides, felt like they were going to be a lot better than people were saying they were. And Spurrier, you could tell, was a little bit like, I'm not sure. And not only I'm not sure, but is just being better than the super low bar that's been set for this team good enough? That was a big thing for him as well, in my opinion, the way I kind of digested what he was saying. It was just a little bit refreshing to me that arguably the heaviest voice in Gator Nation is not with the excuses. Because the excuses are getting a little bit old, in my opinion. I don't know if you feel the same way. I understand patience. When does patience turn into making excuses for the guy? I think that'd be after this year if this year's not good enough.
I think it's
the first couple weeks.
I mean, yeah. I mean, after the first season, you're not supposed to compare, when we graduate college and we get jobs, we always look at like what the rest of our alumni does and what everybody we went to school with, and we compare our jobs like everybody. It's just human nature.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to, because then, I'm not doing as good as this person, and it's not healthy.
Yeah.
But for Billy Napier, he takes over Florida and doesn't do well. And then you look at Brian Kelly, what he did at LSU and flourished at LSU. And then you look at what USC did with Lincoln Riley, with Caleb Williams, and he flourishes in year one. And those are two programs that weren't good under the previous regimes with Ed Orgeron and I think Clay Helton was at USC. I mean, LSU was you can read all kind of stories about not just what was happening on the field, but what was happening at practice and what was happening just all over the program. If you have the guy, and again, football is a lot more than just calling X's and O's. It's how to run a program. It's building a staff. It's building a culture. And everybody that says all the right things to that. Okay, well, you've had 2 entire years now to do what you want. And Billy Napier, unlike Mike Norvell down the road and Brian Kelly and a lot of other coaches, a lot of those guys, they use the transfer portal and they hit with a lot of guys. So they had holes in their team and they filled them. That hasn't been the case with Napier. Napier rolled a lot with the true freshmen. Okay, you want to do that, that's fine. But damn it, those guys got to perform this year. And it's put up or shut up. And you can't say, well, this and that. This is your team, man. And I hate the notion of, well, you got to give 2 years before your guys get in. I'm with Matt Hayes when he says all the time, when you take over that program day one, those are your guys. Now, granted, a lot of those guys, the poison or the rat poison, a lot of the guys from the previous regime, you can get those guys out and you get your guys in, and then you roll.
Yeah, I think that whole concept that Matt Hayes, and that whole concept came from Urban when he took over at Florida. He was one of the first people to ever say that. When I take over, these are my guys.
And it's true.
It is. I will say that was easy for Urban to say when Ron Zook was bringing in top 5 class after top 5. Urban inherited a really, really strong roster. True. And back then, those guys weren't going to leave because Urban was not proven at the time. People thought he ran a gimmicky offense and it was a gimmicky spread that wasn't going to work in the big bad SEC. And then obviously they got their guys in, and that's all she wrote. We know the story. I think at the time it was a little bit easy for Urban to say, like I said, because of the classes and the talent Ron Zook had on. It's easier to say that when Dallas Baker is there and Chris Leak is there, and
that defense
and that ridiculous
Jarvis
defense,
Moss,
yeah,
and Marcus Smart,
and Reggie Nelson, and
Earl Everett,
yeah. So, but fast forward to nowadays, because of the transfer portal, that sentiment is 100% true. Because if Deion can show up to Colorado and completely overhaul the entire roster with transfer portal, basically, and flip it to where pretty much every dude on that roster is someone he brought in, and Billy Napier could have done the same thing. What was stopping him? If everybody's rat poison and if these Dan Mullen guys don't give any effort and they don't try and blah, 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 then why was Princely Umanmielen on the team last year? Right? If he's so bad, then why don't you go get another portal guy instead?
And it's not like, we saw this with Ohio State's quarterback McCord a couple of years ago. They were like, yeah, we kind of don't want you to come back next year. You're not going to be the starter. And they sat down with him at the end of the year like you do in the NFL, and then he went on. If Billy, didn't want some of these guys, he very easily could have done that at the end of the season or when he got the job, cut him loose and then, get whoever you want from the portal or in high school.
Ricky Pearsall was a great portal guy they got, right? Osiris Torrance, year one, which Osiris Torrance came with him from Louisiana. But why haven't we seen another transfer lineman that's come in and been really, really strong?
Right. Well, I mean,
why haven't we seen an extra receiver opposite Ricky Pearsall? Why haven't we seen that transfer corner?
Think of all the transfer guys that came in last year. Who did well? You had Cameron Jackson from Memphis. Didn't really produce much. There's somebody else at the top of my mind. Transfers that came in, because all those guys you named, Ricky Pearsall, Montrell Johnson, Osiris Torrance, all those guys came in 2 years ago.
Yeah.
They didn't come in the last year. So
I mean, Mertz, I guess.
That's true. Mertz did. So, you had a year and it didn't work. And it's not a guarantee. People think that, you give these guys at the portal and they're going to come in and play right away. It doesn't really work like that. This year you have Badger from Wisconsin. You have a couple of guys from Arizona State, Wisconsin, and, you hope those guys do. Yes. So you hope those guys do well. But, I mean, none of that really matters, man. It's all about the production of what you do now. It doesn't matter how you get them. It's all about wins and losses at the end of the day.
I want to get to something that Shane Matthews said in the roundtable. Shane normally says the most spicy things. He says the most clippable material, if you will. Shane, and he's done this since we've started the roundtable a couple years back. Shane is pretty much always the most optimistic one about the program.
Yes.
And some of it has to do with him being optimistic about this program. A lot of his reasoning a lot of times, though, is pessimism about other teams they're playing. And I agree with some of it, disagree with some of it. He was really big on the Cam Ward thing coming in. He's never played in an environment like the Swamp, and he's going to struggle. Shane was really big on that. He was big on a lot of the teams they lost to last year are not the same teams.
New quarterbacks, new coaches.
And it's new for these teams as well, and I get that. And he also said something interesting that we all know, but I think it was just interesting to hear. He was like, look, there's not a single guy in Florida's locker room right now that's training every day, showing up to practice, offseason, whatever. There's not a single player or coach that thinks they're going to lose any game they show up and play. Those guys all, whenever it's kickoff time for each game, they're rolling in thinking they're going to win.
Well, and another thing he said, too, kind of piggybacking what we just said, like he goes, those guys want to be Gators. Like, they want to be part of the program.
Yeah.
That was kind of another thing that I kind of took away from that as well, from what Shane said.
So, that doesn't mean they're going to win those games just because you think you are. Doesn't mean you will. But I think that gets back a little bit to Spurrier's point about, like, I'm kind of tired of the excuses, man. Like, it ain't like the football team. It ain't like the players are showing up thinking, 6-6 will be fine for us. They're not thinking that. They're thinking, shock the world, man. Let's beat Georgia. Let's go. And they're not going to do that, but you get what I'm saying.
The confidence this team has had from Napier to Graham Mertz when you talk with Feinbaum or even SEC Media Days, like, their confidence has been through the roof. Now, I'm not, confidence is, obviously you want to have it. It doesn't mean anything once you get into the season. But that's something that says that they have a lot of buy-in and they believe in what Billy Napier is doing. And that is the beginning point when you get into the offseason, once you start in January. You got to believe in the coach and you got to believe in the staff and your strength and conditioning. And it has to start there. So that at least is a good point. And I can't remember, everybody has coach speak, every time you go to media days in the offseason and every time Napier talks to the podium. But this year it felt different. I don't know if it's because I'm just saying this because it's at the top of my mind now and I don't really remember the last 2 years. But the confidence is through the roof with a lot of these guys.
Well, I think the number one, because you and I have gone back and forth. We've had a lot of optimistic conversations about this team, a lot of pessimistic conversations. One thing that I don't know that I brought up maybe enough, in my opinion, in this podcast, that is probably my number one reason for optimism with this team is I touched on it a little bit a minute ago. this is the first year where I don't feel like they're playing just children out there at a lot of positions. Just like true freshmen playing really important positions. There's not nearly as much of that this year. For the most part, everybody playing on both sides of the ball that's going to be starting playing big snaps are guys that have played some college football before.
For at least 3 years for the most part.
With the exception of probably L.J. McCray, who's a 5-star for a reason. I mean, you know, if everything goes according to plan, that guy's going to be a first-round draft pick in 3 years. So, you know, please get him his snaps. But for the most part, like last year, I mean, you had Miguel Mitchell and Jordan Castell starting at safety for the vast majority of the season, and they're true freshmen. I mean, the safety is an incredibly important position to not give up 50, 60, 70-yard explosive plays, and you've got guys that were playing high school ball last year. Now, you've got Asa Turner, who's a 6th year, who's played a ton of college football. Not in Gainesville, but he's played a ton of college football. And you have Jordan Castell, who's got a full season under his belt now. A lot of these guys, if they're still here and played as true freshmen last year, they've gotten all that experience. Or Billy Napier this year did do better in the portal, in my opinion, getting guys that have played some ball, getting guys that... So now I think they've just elevated the level of experience across the board, and that's going to make a big difference, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, that's kind of probably a reaction to what he saw last year with playing a lot of true freshmen. You know, football coaches in general, the most stubborn people. And once they figure out that they're wrong, they usually overdo it and go to the opposite side. So you played a lot of true freshmen, didn't really work last year. Okay, now we're going to get some experience. And I know my job's on the line.
Well, I think he would never say this publicly, but maybe intrinsically he was thinking this. And I wouldn't think this is a terrible idea. If Billy Napier's kind of thought process, maybe subconsciously in the back of his mind, was like, okay, first couple of years, like, expectations aren't going to be quite as high as they're going to be once I get into year 3, year 4. So what I need to do in these first couple of years is the recruits I feel really good about, 5 stars, 4 stars, what have you, I need to get them on the field and get them reps. A, so they don't transfer, and B, so they get college football experience, and by this time, they can really be really, really good contributors for me. That I can get behind. And then you supplement it with portal guys for the positions that don't work out and whatever. Last thing before, because I know we want to wrap up here, about the round table, just in general. When you listened to it and then it wrapped up, did you leave it feeling better, worse, the same?
Kind of the same.
About the season overall.
I mean, I kind of felt that we're a 6-6 team, at best 7-5, 8-4. If everything goes our way, if like the ball rolls our way, and I think that's what they mostly thought.
They stay really healthy all year.
Yeah, you stay healthy. You get turned. You know, the fumbles go your way a little bit. You get a couple calls here.
A couple of those tipped catches from Pearsall that fall right in Eugene Wilson's lap against South Carolina. You get a couple more of those.
Right. Yeah, you get a couple of those. But yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't feel worse after the conversation.
I agree. I think this whole offseason I've been, if 10 is like I'm really, really optimistic, I think they're going to shock the world, exceed a bunch of expectations, knock off some big teams they shouldn't beat, and make a big bowl game, and we're going to feel amazing. And 1 is I think Billy Napier is not going to be the coach by the Georgia game. I've been about a 5 most of the offseason. It bumped me up to like a 6.5.
I'm the same.
Yeah,
I'm about the same with you.
And especially because, last thing, Shane is like super close to the program, so his optimism I kind of take with a grain of salt sometimes. Not that he knows what he's talking about. Shane's really intelligent, but when you're really close to him, you're just naturally going to be more optimistic about it.
Most people are a mile wide. He's a mile deep in the program.
Right. Spurrier, we've already talked about kind of his feelings on it. Doring was the guy that I think encouraged me the most, because Doring is a Gator, obviously, and he wants them to succeed. And Doring is somewhat close to the program with doing SEC Network stuff and living in Gainesville and whatever. But Doring's not like at practice every day. Doring's a little bit more removed, and he feels pretty confident in things. So that made me optimistic.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'm, going into the offseason, I didn't feel good about really anything. And now, I don't know if it's because the season's about to start or you kind of just, take a chill
It's natural.
pill. And it's natural, every football season.
But look, man, here's the beauty of it.
You feel good about going to the year.
Here's the beauty of it. We're going to know, I'd say probably about after they walk off the field against like UCF, we're going to know if everything we're saying right now is a bunch of lies or if we were.
I think it'll be before then. I think after A&M, we'll know what kind of team this is.
I mean, in some ways, we're going to know by halftime of the Miami game.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. I will see. I'm so over talking. It feels like this buildup is just forever. Like I'm big. I'm a stickler on time. I know you're not. This man, he's about to marry a Hispanic, and if you know anything about Hispanics, they're late to everything. He's taking over from that. But I mean, it feels like time is just sitting still until we get here to August 31st.
Man, that's how August feels for me every year. I think the way the calendar goes for me, we've talked about this before, like during most of the summer, like during like June when it's dead and July when it's dead, like I don't think much about it. I don't think much about like football coming or whatever. I'm kind of like, okay, it's summer, like enjoy some vacation time, enjoy some time off, like chilling. Like I don't really think much about it. But once August starts and the Gators and the Jaguars are in training camp and Jaguars are playing preseason games and we hear about this guy popping off in a practice, this guy popping off in a scrimmage, and this team has named their starter, stuff like that. When that stuff starts happening, it's when I totally agree with you. It's when the talking season gets too heavy and the playing season just it takes forever to get here.
Yes.
That's when I'm like, oh my God, man, I'm just ready for games.
Yeah, at least we have a game Saturday, Florida State, Georgia Tech. I might watch the other couple of games that are on that day. And
because this will probably be our last podcast for that game prediction.
Yes.
What do you think?
Florida State, the line keeps moving between 11 and 13. I think they cover. I think FSU's better. If the offensive line is what the people that saw them when they practiced at Jacksonville a week or two ago, I think Florida State handles it. I think they do. Georgia Tech does hang with them first half, but Florida State's just better.
I don't think they cover. I would take the points with Georgia Tech if I might end up betting on it. I'm not sure. When it's about to kick off, I probably.
Yeah, I was about to say a minute before you go. Boop.
Yep.
That'll change.
But I do think Florida State wins. They are better. They're a better team, and Norvell's a good coach. He'll have his guys ready and all that. I just think Georgia Tech finished the season really strong last year. Brenke's a good coach. I think the way that game turns out is Florida State's going to end up winning by like 7, by like a touchdown or so. Maybe like 31-24, 24-17, something like that. And they're going to win, but I think all Florida State fans and players and what have you, by the end of the game are going to be like, whew, like that was a little bit closer than I wanted to for comfort.
All right.
And that's ideally how. I mean, ideally, I want Georgia Tech to win, but ideally, I want it's first game that means anything. I want some type of drama. I really don't want it to be third quarter games over.
Yeah, I don't want
really
a 3-touchdown lead by one team. If it's Georgia Tech, I'll take it. But yeah, I'm with you. I want some drama, and we can talk about it Sunday and finally talk about Florida Miami. We're trying to get 2 guests next week. We're probably going to happen since we know the two pretty well. Yeah, we'll see y'all Monday.
It's going to be Tim Tebow and Urban Meyer. No, we're just kidding.
I thought you were going to say Miami legend like Ray Lewis or something.
Yeah, Tim Tebow and Ed Reed joining Denmark and Marsh next week.
Peace.